It's a stark paradox within Christianity. Many believers experience God's power in profound ways, yet their spiritual lives often remain shallow and easily shaken. That's the powerful distinction Emmanuel Obeng explores in his book, Knowing God's Ways, Not Just His Works. He argues that we frequently confuse experiencing what God does with truly knowing who God is. Lily, to begin, Obeng points to a specific verse in the Psalms as the cornerstone of this entire idea, doesn't he?
He absolutely does, Daniel. Obeng grounds his argument in Psalm 103, verse 7, which states, quote, "He made known his ways to Moses, his acts to the children of Israel," end quote. He reveals this verse was a pivotal moment in his own spiritual understanding. For him, it highlighted a critical difference between witnessing God's actions and understanding his character. He observed that many sincere believers would experience powerful divine interventions, answered prayers, supernatural provision, deep spiritual moments, but then struggle with instability. They'd be enthusiastic in good times, then discouraged during difficulty, seeking miracles without knowing how to walk consistently with God daily.
So it's about shifting focus from the hand of God to the heart of God, as Obeng puts it. This is a fascinating tension. He acknowledges the beauty and necessity of miracles, but suggests they are not the ultimate goal. Why does he believe miracles alone can't sustain spiritual life?
He argues that while miracles certainly reveal God's power and grace, they're not the destination of faith, they're invitations. Miracles can inspire belief and strengthen faith during a tough patch, but they don't automatically lead to enduring spiritual maturity. Obeng notes that if faith is built primarily on visible acts, it falters when circumstances become difficult or prayers seem unanswered. It's a subtle but dangerous shift when seeking breakthroughs becomes the main focus over cultivating a personal relationship. Miracles attract crowds, he says, but it's truth and relationship that form disciples.
And this isn't a new phenomenon, is it? Obeng immediately connects this modern Christian dilemma back to ancient Israel's experience in the wilderness. They saw incredible acts of God, yet still failed to truly know his ways.
Precisely. Chapter 1 of the book, The Acts of God, unpacks this by looking at Israel's story. They witnessed the plagues on Egypt, the parting of the Red Sea, daily manna from heaven, and water from a rock. These were undeniable demonstrations of God's power and sovereignty. Yet Obeng points out their repeated struggles with unbelief and rebellion, even complaining about food and water just days after the Red Sea miracle. The most striking example is when they built the golden calf while Moses was on Mount Sinai. Psalm 106 verse 13 tragically summarizes it, quote, "They soon forgot his works, they did not wait for his counsel," end quote. They saw God's acts, but those acts didn't transform their hearts.
It sounds like Obeng is suggesting that seeing God's power isn't enough to build character. That spiritual maturity isn't about collecting experiences, but about a deeper internal change. He highlights that God's ultimate goal was always to form a people who reflect his nature, not just to perform miracles for them.
That's it exactly. In Chapter 2, The Ways of God, Obeng clarifies this distinction. He explains that while the acts of God show us what God does, the ways of God reveal who God is. The word way in the Old Testament, derek, refers to a path or course of life, describing how God thinks, relates, and governs. Understanding God's ways means understanding his heart, his values, and his priorities. This leads to a stability rooted in trust rather than being swayed by outcomes.
So, how does Moses fit into this? He's certainly witnessed incredible acts of God, perhaps more than anyone, yet he's presented as the one who knew God's ways.
Moses is Obeng's prime example. Even after seeing the burning bush, the plagues, and the Red Sea, Moses wasn't satisfied. He longed for a deeper understanding. In Exodus 33, verse 13, he prayed, quote, "Show me now your way that I may know you," end quote. He wasn't asking for another miracle, he was asking for revelation of God's character. God's response, "My presence will go with you," shows that knowing his ways opens the door to experiencing his presence in deeper, more personal ways. Obeng points out that when God then revealed himself to Moses in Exodus 34, it wasn't with another act of power, but by declaring his character, merciful and gracious, long-suffering, and abounding in goodness and truth.
This really changes the perspective on how we approach our faith, doesn't it? It moves from what can God do for me to who is God and how can I align with him. Obeng seems to be saying that without this alignment, we risk experiencing God's power without true transformation.
He makes that very point in chapter 3, experiencing power without transformation. He revisits Israel's wilderness story, calling it a classroom of divine power where God provided everything. But instead of gratitude, it often produced fear and complaint. Israel's problem wasn't a lack of miracles, but a lack of trust, as Hebrews 3:9-10 reiterates. Quote, "They always go astray in their heart, and they have not known my ways." End quote. Obeng argues that miracles reveal God's ability, but transformation requires surrender and submission. His acts are often dramatic and immediate. His ways are usually gradual and relational. He cautions that this can be a mirror for modern believers, starting with powerful experiences but then struggling when life becomes complex or God's activity seems less dramatic. Those struggles, he suggests, are invitations into a deeper relationship.
So the invitation from Obeng's book is to move beyond simply experiencing God's power to truly knowing his character. If this episode resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might also find value in this perspective.